Hi everyone and welcome to today's session. This is a pre-recorded session today all about strategies for a successful career comeback. Now, although it's pre-recorded, please still join in on the conversation and pop any questions you have in the comments as when we are launching this. So today there will be Ingrid and Leanne and myself all in the comments waiting to start discussions with you. So anything that you'd like to ask, please pop them in there and Ingrid will be available to answer those. But before we begin, Leanne, would you like to give a quick introduction to the One Group and a bit about what we do?
Yes, thank you, Becca. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. So for those of you who don't know who we are, the One Group are a recruitment agency specialising in numerous divisions across Cambridgeshire, Northamptonshire and Hertfordshire. But we also do a Beyond Recruitment offering where we bring you events, podcasts and LinkedIn Lives as part of that to give that extra value to those people that follow us. So that's why we're here today, to talk to Ingrid about strategies for making a successful comeback.
Awesome. Thanks, Leanne. And of course, hello to our expert guest today, Ingrid. How are you today, Ingrid?
I'm very well, thank you, Becky. How are you?
Great, very good, thank you. So, Ingrid, would you like to give a brief overview and introduction as to who you are and what Midlife 360 do?
Absolutely. I'm Ingrid Fawcett. I'm one of the two co-founders of Midlife 360. We focus on supporting women in midlife who are looking to return to the workplace and addressing the challenges and the barriers that they face. We're a social enterprise and we're Cambridgeshire based.
Lovely, thank you. So without further ado, let's dive straight into today's topic. So Leanne, back over to you.
Thank you so much. So nice today, Ingrid. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. My first question for you is, what are the common misconceptions about people when they've taken a career break?
It can be twofold, really. From the individual's point of view, they can often think that actually, if I take a break, I'm not going to be able to get back in, or people are going to think negatively about the break that I've had. Sometimes those breaks aren't necessarily out of choice. It might be that they're dealing with personal situations or they're having mental health issues. But I think from a personal, if you're looking to take a break away, whether it's to travel or to retrain or upskill, people so often wonder, thinking, "Oh, people are going to think that I'm not quite there." There can also be career breaks for things like having a family or caring responsibilities. So sometimes it's not necessarily a completely choice-based thing. But I think, as most people, when they get to midlife, there will have been something along the way, whether it's having families or not, or other areas as well.
So how can people shift their mindsets then and view this as a positive thing rather than a setback?
I think it's your time. We're only here once. Make the most of the time that you have here. And if you need to take time away from work, whatever the situation is, you can always benefit from that, whether it's to take time out to travel or whether it's to take time with your family. I've got teenagers and I'm very aware that they are on the verge of moving away and going off to universities, and I want to spend time with them. So take it as a good thing. There's a lot that you can learn in that time. So it's not just about taking a break personally and sitting on a beach for a week or 2 weeks or 10 weeks. It's about making the most of that time that you've got and enjoying it and thinking, actually, what can I grow? How can I develop? What can I do? And there's so many opportunities out there for people for self-growth that it's a great thing to do.
And what are the unexpected skills or insights that people might gain during their career breaks?
It can be anything from, if you decide to go and volunteer in your community, understanding where you live, understanding the people that live around you, because we can often get very swamped in our work and our lives are very much revolved around the people that we work with. Actually spending time around and about and understanding the people, it's fascinating. You meet people from all sorts of different walks of life. You can find time in terms of prioritizing. If you've got a young family or if you've got aging relatives that you need to spend time with and look after, there's so much that you can learn from them and from that experience. So really sort of taking into mind you're actually gaining something from this. It's not just that you're giving your time to other people, it's what you can bring back from that. And having that slightly different perspective can really help with your work-life balance going forward. and can make you a better manager, or it can make you a better individual to work with, or team player, because you're learning from other people from around you that aren't just purely work-based.
So, have you got any examples of how experiences during a break have translated into valuable skills within the workplace?
Absolutely. I mean, I think from my own personal situation, we moved to Cambridgeshire, had 2 children, we didn't know anyone, and I had to go out and meet new people. I had to go and build a community of my own here because I didn't know anyone, and that was hugely challenging for me, and it really put me out of my comfort zone, walking into rooms full of strangers, those sorts of things. And you're also in a situation where you've gone from knowing your job inside out to knowing nothing, and having to start again. And that was a real eye-opener for me. And I think it's given me a certain amount of empathy and understanding of what other people go through. I had quite a charm position, it was a good role that I had. But what else could I bring to this? And sort of looking at going into the workplace, when I went back to work, it was a completely different place. So I had to rely on the experiences that I'd had, and managing the situations with 2 small children, time management, financial management, conflict management with small children, being able to use all of these things. Think actually working with adults is quite straightforward, and I can bring a lot of this, and that empathy and understanding really helped me. So yeah, it was that kind of prioritizing as well, really being able to figure out what the important things were.
Yeah. So how can individuals recognize and communicate that these skills that they've learned during their career break?
It's giving examples. It's looking at the things that you're doing over and above your time to yourself, if you like. So if you're volunteering with the PTA at school, for example, if you're fundraising for a local charity, if you're helping with an event, and managing volunteers can be really hard. So all of these things, it's finding those scenarios and finding those pieces of that day to day that you often overlook. The fact that you've been able to get out of the door and everybody is where they need to be at the right times, that is nothing to be underestimated. But also, if you're, like I say, there's a number of different reasons why people will take a career break. So, if you're looking after elderly relatives, that takes a huge amount of personal commitment. So how have you done that? How have you been able to make that happen? And how can you articulate that in a way that people will understand that you're not just taking them to Tesco's? It's that you've got to take them out. You've got to be able to engage and work within a very different sector. The caring sector is hard. It's really, really hard, and it's often undervalued. So it's like, well, what did you do? How did you achieve that? How did you make that? How could this learning be taken into a different place? So it's hard, but it's thinking of examples and scenarios and working around that, really.
So do you have any specific exercises or tools that can help people recognize these skills?
There's nothing in particular that came to mind. I suppose it's just being quite analytical of the time that you've had, and looking back to situations that you've been able to achieve something, and looking at what the situation was, what you did to be able to alleviate that situation, how you worked with other people, and what the outcome was, and really breaking it down and almost twisting it around to being, if I was at work, how would this have been represented? And sort of taking those transferable skills and saying, okay, the soft skills were there. I was able to negotiate with somebody about a deal on something or whatever it might be, and this is how it could work for the next step. So it's always looking ahead to say, well, I've done this, and this is how it could make and value your organization.
Yeah. And so how do you suggest people write about these experiences on their CV or on their LinkedIn profiles?
I think it's about finding those keywords, the things like I mentioned, like conflict management or time management or financial management. All of these things can be replicated back into work. Running a family budget is hard. Getting people, if you're going traveling, being able to work out where you're going and the logistics of that, working that through. If you're dealing with something like really like grief, and how you manage the people around you and how you supported them rather than managed, but how you were able to support yourself and the others around you. So there's a number of different things that you can do to sort of say, well, I found value in working with this particular organization to help me through this process. And from that learning, I've been able to, I can then do this. So it's that building on the empathy piece again, and looking at what you've actually learned, because it's a huge curve, whatever your situation is. And, if you've learned and you've done more education and you've maybe gone back to retraining and sort of saying, well, my experience in my previous role has been accelerated by my experience outside of work, and I've transferring to this, and these are what the skills that I'm bringing. So I hope that helps.
And do you have, can you share a personal story of anyone who has successfully leveraged the skills that they've learned during their career break to advance their career?
Absolutely. A friend of mine she wrote a brilliant article for us about her experience of her 360, she called it. And it was about when she'd had various things going on in her personal life. She had young children and she trained to be a decorator, and it worked around her family and it was all great. But she always knew she had something more. She wanted to do something else. She didn't feel that she'd achieved everything. And she took on a role doing social media for a local estate agent. And that role grew, and she was able to kind of develop her skills through that. And that really gave her something that she really wanted to jump on and grow. So she actually started her own marketing agency, of which she is now a director. And they do some amazing campaigns and some really good work. And that all came from feeling that she hadn't quite achieved what she wanted to achieve. And so from decorator to running a marketing agency, I mean, it's such a brilliant story. And I'm sure she won't mind me sharing that. I probably should check. But yeah, she's really gone out
Too late
there
now.
and yeah, I'll text later. But just to sort of say, this is something that you don't have to have achieved everything in your career by the age of 30, that you can, have a step change, think about something that works around your life at that moment in time, and then that can grow to becoming something bigger and better and better and better. So, and now her children are more grown up. She's got more time to be able to focus on building her marketing agency.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's such an amazing story. So we've talked about skills and the CV. Now let's talk about when you've got the interview. How can people prepare for those scenario-based questions that usually crop up in interviews, and relate it back to their experience that they've gained
Absolutely. It's when you've sorry, cut out a bit then. I think it sort of take a step back really to when you're actually returning to the workplace. It's terrifying, and it's, your confidence could be all over the place. You can't always articulate what you're trying to do. So it's taking that step back and setting yourself achievable goals to say, right, okay, I'm going to do my CV. I'm going to do my interview prep. I'm going to, and break it down so that when you actually get to that scenario, you are ready. So I suppose it's familiarizing yourself with the sort of questions you might get asked and getting ready with those answers. So saying, understanding what they're looking for and also what you want to tell them. So rather than being driven by what they want, to say, well, that's all well and good, but I want to be able to tell you about this situation and this is how it relates back to that scenario, because there isn't always going to be the most relevant experience now. It might come from a previous job or a job before that. But just being ready and being prepared, and also not being shy and being quite confident, because it's hard to sell yourself an interview. We all know that. And I forget what it was like, but it is terrifying. And you want to be able to put everything down and tell everybody everything, but you do need to be quite specific. And, if they're being very targeted with their scenario questions, they're maybe not the right organization for you, because if they're not allowing you to show the transferable skills that you've potentially got.
Yeah. And can you use the volunteer work, if you've done any, and like or personal projects as well in your scenario-based question answers?
Absolutely. I mean, people may have taken a break to to start their own business. I know I did when I had the kids. I started making silver jewelry, and that was great. I loved making it, but I wasn't very good at kind of pushing it out there to try and find places to sell it. So that marketing piece I could have done a lot more on. So absolutely, the managing volunteers is harder than, and working alongside other volunteers is harder than working in a workplace, because there isn't that same, the commitment's different. It's maybe due to something that's happened in their lives. You know, it's not necessarily that they're getting paid for it. So it's a real, you've got to sort of emphasize that. Like, I recently helped with the St. Neots Festival, which was a fantastic event, and I met so many brilliant people, and that took me out of my comfort zone, because it's how you talk to people who are volunteering, and when somebody's maybe not replying to a message and you're like, well, I need to know, and you kind of go back into your work head. It's like, no, we're volunteers, we're doing this for fun, this is supposed to be exciting. And it was brilliant, by the way. So it's kind of being ready with those sorts of stories and saying, well, this is how I dealt with that, and being honest and not trying to pretend.
Yeah. And I imagine that being outside of the work situation and in this volunteer world, or, you know, your personal circumstances, they can bring a unique perspective that you can then put back into the world of work.
Absolutely. So I think people generally get involved in volunteering when they've had something in their lives that's important to them. And that's very personal. Whereas work is important and it's very much part of our lives. You don't have that same connection. So it's kind of being able to transfer that across to say, well, this is what I achieved. We had a fundraising target of 10 grand and we made 12. You know, that is a massive thing to be able to say that you could do. And how you managed to get there is, you know, fundraising is amazing, but really hard, especially in the current climate. So, yeah.
So do you think that there are some recruitment processes out there that have a bias towards people that take career breaks?
Yes, sadly. I think with the world of algorithms and AI, the biases are there on so many different levels, whether it's age or gender or, you know, colour or whatever it might be. We are relying on programs rather than people, which I understand when there's volumes of CVs and there's, you know, so many things to do, that relying on that is quite scary in a way. But there are ways of kind of turning that around to say, if you have got a gap on your CV, then you fill that gap. You say what you've been doing. You may have started a small business. You may be supporting your partner with a business. You may have be upskilling. You know, you may have had to have a mental health break, or you may have been traveling or gone into training. There's so many different things that you could do, but it's just a case of filling those gaps, and making it relevant and honest, and not trying to pretend it's anything that it's not, because you'll get caught out in the nicest possible way. But the algorithms are a real bone of contention for me because of the age thing. People have got, when you get to 50, you've got a lot of CV to fill. And it's like, do you put your age on there? Do you put the dates that you went to university or college or school on there? You know, where do you draw that line? And I think because we are going into a system of AI, that's going to become more and more of a challenge. And I think for organizations, it's to look at evaluating the AI that you're using, looking at the algorithms that you're using, and making sure that they're fair.
So what are the common challenges that people have then when they go back into work after having a career break?
It's that lack of belief, I think, and that sort of recognition of the skills that you actually have. I think a lot of people go back into it with imposter syndrome as well, and going, oh, should I be here? I've had a bit of time out. I don't really know what the processes are. You know, digital skills may have changed. You know, different policies may have changed. All of these things that can be quite crippling if you're struggling a little bit with your confidence anyway. But it's just getting back into the swing of, you know, being accountable. And I know when I went back to work in 2020, that sense of, oh God, someone's actually employed me. Wow. But then going, I feel like I've lost a lot. You know, I don't know. I've had 10 years of doing my own thing. Am I manageable? Am I part of a team? Can I do this again? And I think you underestimate the value that you have, but it takes a little bit of time to get back into your stride, I think.
So do you have any tips and advice for how they can try and build up their confidence and overcome these challenges?
Absolutely. I think talking to the people around you who see you day to day and getting their input, because a lot of it's in your mind. You're talking yourself down. Your confidence is so much so that you're thinking, oh, no, I can't do that. But talk to the people around you. Ask them, not necessarily immediate friends, because they're always going to say nice things, but maybe people that you volunteered with, or people that you know through other areas of your life, to say, well, actually, what is it? What do you think makes me the person that I am? They may be brutally honest, but you know, that's part of growing as well, sort of that constructive criticism. But sort of practically looking and breaking down what you've done for the last however long you've had out of work, looking at what you've been able to achieve and go, actually, I have got a lot to give. Don't be shy of that. And sort of almost repurposing your brain to say, talk yourself up, don't talk yourself down.
Yeah. And actually, if they've got LinkedIn profiles, they could reach out to people that they used to work with to ask for recommendations, because that's a nice little confidence boost there as well. Do you have any other... Sorry,
I was going to say, you never know who you've worked with in the past that might want to employ you again. LinkedIn is a very valuable tool like that. And it may be that you don't want to go back into the job that you had, but you want to stay within that industry, or you want to say, well, can you give me... The best thing is to phone for references or get in touch and say, would you be my referee? This is what I'm thinking of doing, and starting those conversations. If you haven't got a network like that, then that can be tricky. But I think most people will have somebody that they can go back to and say, could you, put a good word in for me, or, use that kind of knowledge, because they know you, they know your capabilities. They may suggest about reskilling or retraining, or, going and finding something that can give you a bit of a boost. But yeah, LinkedIn is fabulous for that.
And do you think there's a value then in trying to stay connected with people that you worked with, whether it be on LinkedIn or outside of that environment, to try and keep a link with the working world?
Absolutely. I mean, you can feel at times that you're the furthest away from it and think, oh God, this is another world to me now. I mean, I've kept connections with people that I used to work with in London, and they've been invaluable over the last couple of years when starting Midlife 360, and in my previous role as well. They've gone on to do their own businesses and do coaching and things. So there's having that connection and remembering who you were. You're still the same person, you've just got a different lived experience now. So own that, value that, and keeping in touch is great. And it can be hard to reinstigate those relationships, but it's a message on LinkedIn at the end of the day. Don't overthink it, and go for it.
Yeah. And you mentioned upskilling previously. Do you think that that's important for people returning to work? And if so, what sort of upskilling should they focus on?
I mean, I found it invaluable because I started back at work in lockdown, and my boss came to my front door and said, here's a laptop. It's got Office 365 on it. Crack on. And I didn't have a clue what any of that meant. So because it was lockdown, I literally had nothing. So I spent lockdown reskilling and understanding and working my way through, and web-based this, and understanding what marketing was. And, and I was lucky that I had that time to be able to do that, and not many other people are. But I think in terms of technical skills, they've come on so much in the last 10 years. But also, if you're looking to transfer into different areas, you need to have a knowledge base as to what their expectations might be. Transferable skills go so far, but you still need to have technical skills, or whatever the need is. So yeah, I think upskilling for anybody throughout our lives, we're always learning. But it's kind of that also adds into filling that gap on your CV, and also showing that you've not just, like I say, sat in a garden. So
yeah, drinking mojitos. Oh no, sorry. So what qualities and different perspectives can people from midlife bring after a career break?
I think for me, and what I found with talking to the women that we've been talking to within our organisation, it's that they want to work. They are keen to put their experience into something. They have empathy. They have an understanding, which you don't necessarily have when you're a bit younger. No disrespect to anybody in their 20s, but having now nearly 50, I've got a different sense of how businesses can work, how we can work together. There's a level of commitment that I maybe didn't have when I was in my 20s that I do now. And I think that comes across from other women as well. They want to work now, not just for the next 2 years, but for the next 10 or 15 years, which as an employer, you'd bite someone's hand off if that was that level of commitment. They may need something that's more flexible, that can work around their life choices. But also, I think you have a different perspective on what's important and what's not. It's just a bit more, I think, for me, when I was 25 to how I am now, a bit more balanced.
Yeah, definitely. And how can companies then actively encourage and support the recruitment of people in midlife?
I think it's offering things that are above and beyond. So I don't, we're not, for me, it's more about what that company offers as a whole. You know, do they give 3 days to go volunteering? Do you have a strong menopause policy? Do you have flexible working? Is it hybrid or is it hybrid and flexible? Um, you know, are there systems in place to be able to support women and men who are returning to the workplace, and that they may need a longer induction process, or they may need further training? If you're looking at transferable skills, that's brilliant, but you also need to be able to support that with whether it's a buddy system or something where people can rely on somebody else to be able to support them. But there's also that sort of two-way mentoring thing, so that if there are people who are recent graduates who are maybe looking for someone to look up to in terms of their experience, but vice versa, you know, what can we learn from the younger generations in terms of their understanding of particularly things like AI and social media and those sorts of things. So it's being more open and not allowing the bias of algorithms to stop people in their tracks.
And how can people try and sell themselves or market themselves to these companies to look like they're, you know, just as good as someone who hasn't had a career break?
It's really hard, and it depends, I suppose, on the sector that you're in. I think it's about being proud of what you've done, and not shying away from it and not dressing it up as anything that it isn't. You know, if you've had a break because you're caring for your parents or whatever it might be, put that down. You know, that's nothing to be ashamed of. That's something that, as an employer, they should be looking at the experiences that you have, the understanding that you've got, and also look at that as being, well, actually, they've got their priorities right in my eyes. Whether employers think like that, I'd hope so. But yeah, it's about that kind of they bring a rounded and more diverse outlook to those organisations, and I think organisations need to see that as well.
So you talked about that lady that you knew who successfully had an amazing journey and now owns her own marketing company. Have you got any stories of companies that have hired people from midlife and how they've added value to their company?
Absolutely. We're doing some work with an IT company at the moment who are based in Cambridge, and they've recognised through the women, they've got 2 women in their business that they want to replicate. They think they are fabulous. They've just brought another woman in who again is in midlife, and they have sort of seen that they want a more flexible, because they've got caring responsibilities and things going on in their own lives, but they recognise everything that they bring, from that knowledge, that understanding, that kind of commitment. Their work patterns are very different to the rest of the team in that they work around their families. One of them works 5/7, so they've really adapted their culture, and they've come to us to say, we want to attract more women like this to our business, and we are keen to be able to be as flexible as we can. We want more diversity in our workplace. We recognise there's different people, you know, we can look at different areas, and midlife is particularly one that stands out for them because they've had successes already, and they've really built that into their culture, and it's fabulous to see.
Oh, that's a really lovely story. And it's really great to know that there are companies out there that can see the value that midlife people with or without career breaks can bring. Ingrid, it's been absolutely amazing talking to you today and finding out all about this subject. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we end the session?
Just to say thank you so much for having me, and yeah, if you want to know more about Midlife 360, you know where I am.
Brilliant.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Ingrid and Leanne, for today's session. As I said, this is pre-recorded, but Ingrid and Leanne and myself will still be in the comments if you do have any final questions. And of course, you can reach out to Ingrid on LinkedIn. She's all linked in the comments above, if you do have any further questions or you'd like to work with Ingrid in the future. So as I said, brilliant session. Thank you, Ingrid. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And we'll see you on the next